What's up, WWE Champions Universe? Welcome to Champions Chat, the fastest growing podcast dedicated to the WWE Champions mobile app. I'm the $1 Million Man, Rusty Graves, and with me, as always, is Virgil Lee Brown. What's up, Lee?
Wow. I was afraid you were going to go to IRS, and then somehow we threw Vincent in there. Oh, man. I'm going to have to, we start doing videos of this. I'm going to put up the sad Vincent, sad Virgil meme on screen right then. That would be.
So, to those of you
Wow.
listening, I have this little script that I do the intro through, but I don't have those nicknames in the script. I like Michael Scott said, I start a sentence and sometimes I don't know how I'm going to end it. It's like an improv conversation and improvisation.
Improvisation. And I'm always on the receiving end of that. So I'm learning my improvisational skills. So.
And I could have gone
Yeah.
so many other ways. I could have called you the Hulkster. I could have called you any number of 80s legends that would have been becoming of the man that you are. And instead I chose to make you my $1 Million manservant, my ever-present bodyguard and butler.
One of my earliest memories from childhood was actually there was a comic book that WWE did during the 80s, and they had like these little short vignettes, and one of them was like, I think Marvel might have even produced it, but it was this little short, like it wasn't the whole comic, it was just this thing. It was Roddy Piper versus the $1 Million Man, and they were fighting like backstage and all this, and the game changer of course was Virgil, because then it became 2-on-1. So I'm out here helping you win the title, even though the $1 Million Man officially is not recognized as a WWE champion. The travesty that he is not recognized, even though he held the belt technically.
He's one of the greatest heels ever.
That's right.
Ted DiBiase could get an arena to boo him faster than just about anybody could. I'll say this, since we're kind of gone into real world wrestling for a second, like I think Vince McMahon's recipe that he began to use for like comeuppance, seeing someone bad get it, he had it coming, and so he got it.
Right.
I think that Virgil turning on $1 Million Man was one of the first that I can remember in kind of modern wrestling history where like the comeuppance was huge. It got a huge pop. He became his own superstar. It was, I think that might have been a turning point for Vince going, this really worked. This is we need more of this. This is a formula that I think we can build on and do more of in the future. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yep. And I think it's very interesting, and we'll get back into the game more quickly here in a second, but it's very interesting that the $1 Million Man character was Vince McMahon imagining himself as a wrestler, and he decided who he was going to give it to. Ted DiBiase ended up being the guy. But if you look at history, especially back then, even now, all the wrestlers are paying for their own travel. They're paying for their own food, blah, blah, blah. Like they're all, the whole big thing of they're not unionized. They're considered basically day laborers, like their contracts, they have to stay, but they also, aren't being paid as if they're an employee, etc. But Ted DiBiase, in order to keep up kayfabe back in the 80s, Vince literally supplied him with not private jets, but first class flights, with money to throw around. Like he had to be the $1 Million Man everywhere he was. And so he was literally just taking Vince's pocketbook and going like this, throwing it out there. So, I mean, if you're going to get one of the best gimmicks of all time and one of the best laughs in history, that money. Yeah. And that's, I mean, he had to play that character 24/7. So he got to throw Vince's money around because that was Vince self-actualizing as a wrestler, because he couldn't, like at that point, bring himself to be a wrestler.
I've never heard this. This is all new to me. Where would that story have been told? Do you have any idea?
Ted DiBiase on some of the social platforms. He's mentioned it
Oh,
there.
okay.
There's a documentary years back, and I'm pretty sure if I had to pick one place, and I might be wrong, so if you test me on it and I prove false, that's not because I'm misleading you, it's because my memory is shoddy on it. But there was a WWE documentary, like the greatest superstars of the 80s, and Ted DiBiase was one of them, and I'm pretty sure they told that tale there. But if I'm
I
wrong on that, I'm wrong where it is. I'm not wrong on the facts.
I grew up in Southwest Louisiana in a community that you know very well. You've lived there
Yeah.
multiple times at different points in your life. There was a guy that was in our little community named the Southern Gentleman Teddy Knoll, and he
Oh,
was a longtime friend and wrestler, and he knew Ted DiBiase intimately. They were very close friends, and Teddy Knoll wrestled in like NWA and different, kind of in that territory in the South
right.
Louisiana Junkyard Dogs territory, basically
Oh,
that
okay.
Mississippi Delta region. But he would tell me stories about Ted and being on the road with them together. And it was incredible. So you can look up the Southern Gentleman Teddy Knoll, and he would have been wrestling in 80s and early 90s still, but
Nice.
from Lake Charles, Louisiana, like
There
a
you go.
legitimate guy. Well, we are. Let me give you one update where real life wrestling intersects with the game. I haven't actually shared this with Lee yet, but just know that if you're a longtime Champions Chat listener, we're asking ourselves, how do we take this thing and get to the next level? Well, there's two ways, and Lee can share with you some of. We're going to do some hardware upgrade and try to get a little better recording quality and clarity. But the second thing, and maybe the exciting thing, is this: I, as of this morning, I have messaged three WWE superstars, inviting them to come on to the podcast. One is this month's featured character, Wes Lee. Another, and I haven't told you this yet, is Miss Piper Nevin. I actually sent a
Oh,
message to Piper Nevin this morning saying
wow.
there's been quite a buzz around your character's poster in this game. Would you want to
Right.
come on and talk about it? We'd love to have you. And so,
Great.
yeah. You've messaged some wrestlers as well, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. DDP and I have a mutual connection, guy named Pat, and it always feels like, okay, well, is this a troll? Is this what does this guy do? Like they get thousands of messages a day of like, could you please? It would change my life if you would, and I get that. So if nobody shows up,
Yeah.
hey, we made the effort. But yeah, and from my days in the very very brief days I had in the Indies, I have a couple connections that I wasn't even thinking about. I might try to leverage. But if you don't see anybody famous show up on the podcast, we still got some content creators that are coming on in the future. But we'll see.
Yep.
You never know. We might surprise somebody.
And if you're out there listening and you like what we do and you have a connection to a current or past WWE superstar, especially one that's been featured in this game, we would
Yeah.
love to help. If you could help us make that connection, because what's really interesting about podcasts is a lot of times people will come on it and use it as a platform to promote their thing, kind of like a press
Right.
appearance. And so we'd love DDP to come on and talk about DDP yoga and help sell
Yeah.
those on our show. But the other thing is there's this interesting thing with podcasts to where like um, once you kind of break the dam of having like the first guest, that
Yeah.
creates the precedent that like, oh, this is a safe thing. And we saw that
Right.
happen with when Iron Sheik came on. We were able to share
Yeah.
that
Love
episode
Chic.
with Professor, and then Professor, okay, so they're not just trolls. They're not out to,
Right.
they're not bashing Scopely. They're not trying to entrap content
Right.
creators.
Yep.
And so
And then
if we can get
Professor
one,
went on his stream and was
yep,
with
yep,
Davey and was telling
yep,
Davey about the podcast right there live on the Champs Chat, or not Champs Chat, that's us, on the WWE Champions Twitch channel. So yeah,
yeah,
you never know what can
incredible.
happen.
So if we get the first wrestler,
There
it's
you go.
almost a guarantee that like we'll get two or three more.
We will get Vince McMahon on this. No, never mind. We probably, I don't know. We'll see. We'll get the $1 Million Man on the podcast. We should really go on to the game stuff because I'm going to take us places.
Yeah. We can do that. We can do that. Well, let me ask you, open-ended question. What's going on in the game?
What's going on in the game? So we are, a couple weeks into the NXT takeover, and we've talked in the past couple episodes about the game is changing, even more so than the 6-star meta. We are seeing the shift to what the game is going to be in the next couple of years. These new move set things, like with Terry Funk and Cowboy Bob, the way that the trainers are working. Like as of this recording, they just put Braun Breaker striker version in the game, and he is a 4MP coach or trainer, for 2 different colors. So in the past we've had 3 of one color, 1 of the other, or 2 of one color and 1 of, etc. We've had but it's been smaller amounts. And then your main trainers were 4MP of one color. And now Braun Breaker assumably breaks the dam, which is both a segue from what we just talked about, but also a horrible pun on his quite silly wrestling name, especially the way it's spelled. Anyway, Breaker, but it breaks the dam for probably having a trainer of each of the combinations. So not just 6, because that would be one color, but what it would be 32 or something like that, or different characters that have the different color combinations over the next year. So that's one big change that's coming up. What do you think about that?
Well, that is big. And if you've played other games or maybe like a trading card game, you notice that game makers tend to do things in cycles versus standalone. And
Yeah.
so you can almost always assume that if you've seen it once, if there's a new dynamic being introduced to the game, that it
Yep.
is the first of many to come. That would be a very exciting cycle to receive. And
Right.
and I would think that that a trainer ability of that kind of value would assumably be paywalled or out of reach to the free to play players. I mean, that's just my assumption. I
Right.
could be wrong,
Right.
but and
No,
that's
he's S
often,
tier.
yeah, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, this will be maybe like the chase cycle or the weekend characters that they do
Right.
intermittently for the next year or so.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I could see that. And I mean, every one of them is going to change. Like bronze, I think, is yellow and blue, the 2 moves that he buffs. So right immediately as soon as I saw that, I started thinking in my mind, okay, who uses yellow and blue that I need to put in the mix there? And so that's what we're going to start doing and thinking about. And yeah, this is one of the many game changes. Can I share one change, possible trend that I'm noticing that may actually concern me a little bit? You
I
all right
think,
with that?
I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically our bread and butter is of
Right.
noticing what's happening in the game and talking about
Yeah.
it, whether it's good or bad. So
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. So we're not afraid to call out when something is maybe not as it should be, right? We did an episode on Scopely screw ups and stuff. This is not a screw up. This seems now to be intentional. And, something I always tell my staff is if someone does something one time, you give them a lot of grace for that. Like that might be an accident. They might have been having a bad day. But if something happens multiple times, then that's a pattern. And patterns
Mm.
are something we need to look at. One of my mentors, he often says, resumes lie, track records rarely do. And that's such a good statement. So it's not yet a track record, but it's happened now 2 months in a row. And it concerns me quite a lot is that the change that happened prior to about a couple months ago was they took away the solo MLC points from the weekend. The weekend events used to be tied to the solo MLC. So even if you didn't get the weekend character, which again, following up from last week's podcast, most people don't. 80, maybe even 90% of the player base are not going to get any given weekend card. And so you have that going on. So what players like me who do tend to hit the solo MLC each month or most months, what we're looking for is progress towards the solo on the weekend. So that went away. I wrestled with it. I struggled with it. Really kind of had a moment where I was like, okay, am I only playing weekends now because of the faction that I'm in? Because I want to help my faction family, and I do. And I would say that that's probably a big part of it. For me, weekend is when I work a lot of hours in a week, and so Friday's my day off, Saturday's sometimes off. So that's when I have time to play. And now they've taken that away. What's more concerning to me now, and then we can kind of discuss this, the whole thought, is that last month and now this month again, we had an entire week where there was no solo MLC points in the midweek event. So functionally, the thing that is the primary dangling carrot for the largest portion of the player base, the solo MLC, wasn't even there this week again. And while yes, I would have loved to have gotten Regal, I'm actually not that far away in shards, and if I could have spent $200, I could have got them guaranteed, but I'm not that guy. I don't have $200 extra right now, or most times, to throw at the game. And so my incentive to play the game this week was a lot lower than usual. So thoughts on that? How do you react? What are you feeling with those?
Well, I have a few reactions. First of all, I've noticed that our faction Discord has been rather quiet this week.
Yeah,
Our
absolutely.
our Discord is actually made up of around 300 people. So it's three
Yeah.
factions that come together as kind of one faction family, and yet
Yep.
there hasn't been much conversation, even though this is a week where we're preparing for a weekend feud. There was a
Yep.
midweek blitz, and
Yep.
yet I noticed as a faction, we maxed that blitz, the faction blitz contest really rather
Like day
quickly,
one.
and
Yeah.
yet, yeah. And yet on the solo side of the blitz, I only had one of the nine
Yeah.
special characters, right? That
Right.
that it would take to get the points in this blitz. So I got to milestone 6 of the solo contest, 6 of 10, and
Right.
I checked in and just said, "Am I seeing this correctly? Like, I have
Right.
no incentive to keep going because
Yep.
I can't." So I share all that about blitz to say I'm wondering if this is a little bit of a pattern where we're seeing people ask themselves,
Right.
where's the incentive to play this game? Because
Yeah.
either we did it really fast and it's over,
Yep.
or the points don't count, or they can't be calculated because I don't have the custom or the CS of the contest superstars. I don't have it.
Right.
And so showdown, there's no incentive to keep going. Blitz, there's no incentive
Right.
to keep going. This if this crept into feud, I would
Right.
think it would be a very disturbing pattern and an interruption of regular gameplay for the first time since I've played this game, where people are just
Right.
going, "There's nothing to do. There's nothing to
Right.
do."
Yeah.
And
The
that's
one thing you
that's
don't want to do is give people a reason to go somewhere else. Right. And that's what you're describing. Maybe they've given someone a reason to go somewhere else. I don't think this is going to be long term. I think they're going to get this figured out, because I hope they start to see engagement numbers drop and go, whoops, okay, we did something wrong. And then all of a sudden it's back to normal, or at least a new normal. But I don't know. I don't know.
And, of course, we have questions. Does that mean they're doing things on the back end in the development that is requiring their attention, and so they've slowed
Right.
down or made some of these hurdles? Or is this a
Right.
new, dare I say it, is this a new economic model that they're experimenting
Yeah.
with? Because to not have 8 out of the 9 contest superstars for a blitz feels
Right.
really, really bad. And I would even say the only one I had was the free MLC character that they gave me, Wesley. So
Yeah.
I don't have Regal. I don't have King Woods. I don't have Rebel Lita. I don't have Trish holding the little poodle. I don't have King Booker. So then I'm just
Tori.
like, who did I say?
You said Trish. It's
Oh,
Tori.
I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're good. You're good.
and so that's why I just am thinking like, like,
Right.
am I supposed to have these superstars? And if
Right.
so, how in the world would I have got? I could see maybe Showboat Montez would be a really common, at least,
Yeah.
or maybe Hall of Fame Brett, are
Yeah.
two, and maybe if I spent a little bit more in recent months, I might have those two. But I'm thinking
Right.
these are like some of the chase that, like, I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
who in the heck's got, eight, nine of these? I don't know anybody
Right.
that does.
No, I mean, I had Lita. Lita and Montez were chases. I have Hall of Fame Brett. Obviously, have Wesley. I think I had one or two others, but the majority of those I didn't have. And I'm curious too. I'm thinking. So I don't want to say quickly, but with our faction maxing at day one, that was a lot of bonus points. So that puts you and I on the same scale to compare. I hit the last free milestone pretty early on in the day and was going, okay, well, this means if I can get to the second bonus milestone, I'm guaranteed William Regal because I just that's the way the math's going to work out. The shards are there, right? And so I started doing the math, and I was like, okay, there's $100 offer, which I could have. I almost called in literally a favor of like my family saying, hey, my birthday's in a few months. Could you spot me early and I just forget the birthday thing? I almost did that because I would have come within 50 shards. But then I started doing the math of getting to that next milestone. It would have taken 2 mega pulls. So my economy, that's 200 US dollars. And I just didn't have it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to wait and see what day two looks like. Maybe there's a better offer. There's going to be another tour. I didn't pay attention to the fact that literally on those tours as well, there was CSS requirements. And I have a pretty decent roster. I had exactly 0 of the CSS for the bonus tour, or for the, I guess, the regular tour, midweek tour on that. But I didn't get any of the bonuses. King Booker happens to be one of the chase characters that I missed. I've got most of them. I don't have him. He would have been by far the most quote unquote common that you could have had. And to be clear, I don't begrudge Scopely for giving bonus quote unquote milestones to people who have spent and have a bigger raw. Like that's, you gotta do that. But I think what we're talking about here is the balancing of the game
Right.
had been moving more like, oh, this is more and more free to play friendly than it's ever been. And this, not even this month, because the first week felt great, but this week even. So this is just recency bias. This isn't, necessarily like the full story, but this recency bias of this year is that this week felt like if you weren't literally one of the top players in the game, you really didn't even have that much to do. And that doesn't feel good.
That's right. It was interesting that there wasn't like a normal mode blitz with less restrictions and a price structure. Like, it's interesting to me that blitz, let's say one of the 4 or 5 pillars of this game,
Yeah.
is as much as is or as infrequent as we want or don't want it to be.
Yeah.
Gauntlet Blitz, especially, has been, something that's been in the game since the
Right.
early days of the game. And so these pillar events should be a platform for players of all roster sizes to play on.
Right.
I was very confused why there were only faction points in the Blitz. I was very
Right.
confused why there were not, or maybe even a secondary list of CSS superstars for the normal mode, the female
Yeah.
Blitz. There just was no. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And let me, just some little insight into me. So, we've talked about this on the back end a little bit. For those who know the language, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm an achiever on the Strengths Finder. I'm a type A. I'm a doer that is trying to make sure I stay in the realm of being a quipper. But all of those portraits pick a point, a picture of like, I need something to do. So here's a little kind of other video game insight into my world. I've got on my shelf right here an NES, one of my original NES from way back in the day. Nintendo, far and away, in terms of overall quality versus overall quantity comparison, probably has made the best games in history. There's a couple other publishers that are up there, but I don't think anybody would say Nintendo isn't near the top, if not the top. Ever since they introduced the trophy and reward systems, PlayStation trophies, Xbox achievement points, stuff like that, not gonna lie, it's really hard for me to play Nintendo games now because there's no digital gotcha. There's no trophy, there's no reward. The best thing I can say is I beat Super Mario, whatever the newest one is. I beat Odyssey, I did. I beat it, but there's no like gratification for the 3 in me, the achiever in me. I need a box to check off. Even on my days off, like some people, like today's my day off. A lot of people are like, oh man, my day off, I'm gonna lay down, I'm gonna watch Netflix, I'm gonna, whatever. Like, unless it has some sort of it moved me forward in some way, it's even harder for me to do that. Now that's a personal failing, etc. But all that to say, the solo MLC is for many people the most achievable, let's call it slightly premium content that's in the game. And when there's not solo MLC points on the weekend, I'm playing for my faction. Maybe I'm playing for a little bit of rewards, but for the most part, I know that 90% chance I'm not going to get that character. When there's not solo MLC points during the week, I'm playing the Nintendo model. I'm like, this may be and is my favorite video game ever. Final Fantasy just came out with a mobile. Well, I wonder if I should sneak over and just try that out. And that's Scopely's bane. The reason there are midweek contests, the reason that there are weekend contests, the reason that there's solo MLC contests, all of that is to keep you engaged in this game on this platform so that you don't wander into another yard. Because if you wander into another yard, you might not wander back. And I think this week was a good example of how Scopely got it wrong and hopefully fixes it, that they had me thinking about wandering into another yard for a little bit.
mm, that's that's a good point. I mean, you definitely, as long as I've known you since college undergrad, you've been an action-based guy,
Yeah.
someone who's goals oriented, and those seem to be two things that come very easily in this game. That they can put
Yeah.
action in front of us and they can give us some goals to meet. I think I have a little different motivation,
Yeah.
and yet I think I want those things as well. I want to have fun, right? That's why
Right.
I love the build up to an event. I love talking
Yeah.
strategy on Discord. I love doing a
Right.
boss battle strategy guide and watching a Mirex video and him trying out ideas. Like that's something I
Right.
love. And the way this week went, that none of that is even possible. None of
Yep.
there was no collaborative play. There was no
Right.
maybe the feud, like a little bit of chat is happening about feud, a little
Right.
bit. But so
Yeah.
let me ask you this. I saw someone new to our faction say, I thought joining a faction at this level, top 30, I thought moving into a top 30 faction was gonna be, different. I thought I was gonna be a different place in the MLC, pace. I
Right,
thought, my points would be, I guess my MLC points would be higher,
right,
and
right,
yet I feel like I regardless of my level in the game, I've been paywalled, that
right,
I'm stuck behind the CCS limitations. Do you
right.
think other people are feeling that way?
Well, we're seeing some of it in the chat. I mean, I think the reality, that person in particular, our friend El Nino came over, and we all went from, kind of where average faction milestone was 2 to 3 out of 5 or 6 to 7 out of 10, depending on what milestone rewards were there. And now, day one, we're hitting a lot of the faction milestones. So we are definitely getting more solo MLC points. We're definitely getting more engagement. We're definitely getting more rewards. All of those things that are great by being in a faction. Ours, I would say, is very a good mixture of it. It's kind of a community involved. We definitely, like, there's no zeros allowed. You got to chat on Discord and stuff, but there's not like this overwhelming pressure that you have to do all these things. You got to run this feud lineup. You got to, whatever. We're just like, we are all, as our leader Schmike said, we're all adults playing wrestling Candy Crush. We know what we're doing. Let's just do it, right? And do it together. But yeah, I mean, even with that, if somebody is struggling, to come over, like I kind of responded. I was like, hey, even in the situation we were in before with another family of a faction that we just loved, but wasn't hitting those higher, I still was maxing a lot of the MLCs, and I do expect to max them a lot easier here. But yeah, I think really this frustration of an entire week without solo points really hit people hard, because the reality was, like I pulled Wesley, and now at 5-star silver, and shards to take him, to 6-star when I get there. Now having that as a part of the overall solo MLC, every level I take Wesley up, right? And then in order to get that, because I told you I just had this gut feeling like I need to do all of D'Lo's tours today, and I need to do a 55 pull. I didn't see anything about like key pulls being good. I just had this like weird, I've got to do this. So I maxed all of D'Lo's tour day one. I got Wes Lee day 1, 2, whatever it was, at 5-star silver, maxed him out at 5-star silver. He's ready for 5 gold, and all of those points count. So I would have maxed in the old structure that individual talent up, but now it's in there. And for me to be barely on pace now this week because of this, it's a little deflating, right? I should be way ahead of pace, and especially considering that I've done so much of the leveling up. I've almost maxed my tour perks, all of these things, that are normally like, hey, I kind of save these towards the end of the month just to boost. That's a little concerning. So hopefully Scopely adds bonus, new, extra, I don't know, points in the next week or two. But they said, at least, Merrick's conveyed that they were saying that they were going to do that last time they quote unquote missed solo MLC points in a midweek setting. And I don't know that they really did. I definitely didn't see double. I did see more, but I only maxed last MLC by 25,000 bonus points, maybe, which is not a huge buffer. I mean, that's not a huge buffer. So I don't know. We'll see. But I definitely feel for those who are struggling with this. And if it reverses next week, we'll forget about it and everybody will move on. But if this
That's
is a
right.
trend, yeah, track
Yeah.
records don't lie.
Well, and this is a weekly podcast, and so it's great to remember that the conversation we're having is about this week in the game, and we can kind of
Right.
forecast. And yet, next week
Yeah.
episode, we may look back and go, oh, "We were way off. We were way off."
Yeah.
Right? Samsonite, I was way off.
I was way
Um,
off.
so
I
uh,
love that.
I've noticed
Oh,
this week there's just been a slow leak of coins and they've not refilled. I did a mega
yeah.
pool chasing something, and I've been kind of riding high on a coin surplus, And
Right.
I have come to the end of my coin surplus, and it has just been a
Interesting.
slow leak. I'm at like 5 million coins. I'm
Oh,
going,
wow.
and I've maxed every coin event,
Right.
and I stop. Usually when I max it, I stop. I don't just keep
Right. Oh, right,
overspending.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I want to say I started this MLC with a surplus of over maybe 150 million coins, and
Okay.
I'm down to 5 million. Um,
See, that's
and
interesting.
they've not come back because so many of those coins are connected to solo point milestones. At least my theory. That's my theory
Yeah,
is if there's no
that
solo
could be it.
points, there's no solo point milestones, there's no
Right.
injection of currency into the game. And so I'm thankful there's no coin event tomorrow. And yet I'm at milestone one and going, how do I best spend these 5 million coins?
Right.
Either to
When you
prepare
need
for feud,
48 to max.
let
Yeah.
me level up my feud perks first and see
Yeah.
if that helps on some level. In fact, I'm going to do that now while we talk a little bit. And yet, I think it's not just the chase and the pace that are being
Uh,
affected, but the actual econ of the game. Goldie calls it the econ, coin and
right.
TP and shard injection into the
Right.
game, which goes to maybe the point that I've said a few times is that in the 6-star meta now, the player base needs a cost of living raise because we're
Yeah.
experiencing gross inflation of what's required to play the game at that level on the roster.
Yeah. Well, so that's very interesting. And I was actually gonna start going down a path, but then you said something that maybe kind of made me change it. But I've had the exact opposite reality this month. So if you remember, I went from over a billion to literally down to under 200 million coins in my free to play month. Then from there to here, I haven't spent a ton. I did spend my normal $60 that I have each month for the game. I spent that. Didn't get Regal, but did what I did. So I bought a little bit on the portal and stuff, but not enough where it's going to be hundreds of millions of coins like some people are getting. But based on where I've been, this from where I started this month at under 200 million, I've maxed every event. I actually went above and beyond for a couple of the faction ones, not even because we needed it, because we had maxed, but we just was like, what if we keep going and just hit higher on the milestone? Like, we're not chasing the top 5 factions, but what if we just go for it for a little bit and have some fun? And so I put a little extra into some guys. I made a couple 6-star moves. I took even my IOW Kurt Angle up to 6 silver and some of that kind of stuff that didn't really count for anything, and I'm now sitting at almost 500 million coins. So I have a net positive of 300 million coins this month, not counting, or taking into account, I should say, maxing that 48 million 5 times a week or 4 times a week or whatever it is. So
Well, the difference is that if you're out there and wondering, maybe you're feeling the surplus or feeling the shortage, the difference, just to reiterate, would be Lee had many of the CSS characters for the Blitz and for the tours. I did not. And Lee pulled the fuse, the 5-star fuse,
right,
early in the talent up, and I did not.
that
So
made a big
that
difference. That's right.
that would be I guess, the comparative trajectory if someone's out
Yeah,
there feeling
yeah.
like these, what the heck,
What the
they're not
heck?
playing the game right. I got plenty of
Right,
coins.
right.
Maybe, right?
Maybe
Maybe,
you might be
or
spending on the
others,
portal a lot more. Yeah,
yeah, or then others out there are going, I ain't got no coins.
right.
So it's
Well,
interesting. You
you're
can,
right on that. Yeah,
yeah, it's just interesting. You can be in a faction with somebody, and they can max the MLC and you cannot, and you're scratching your head, going, "Am I playing the game wrong? I think I'm
right,
doing all the same things as my buddies." And
right.
and so, do you think there's an expectation that people have that if they're in a top, let's say top 50, right? if
Sure.
they're in a top 50 faction, then 100 out of 100 should be maxing that MLC. Do you think that's the perception, or is that the expectation of the community?
I think it's possible. One of my wrestling points, and wrestling podcast, but one of my wrestling points was being on Merrick's stream when we were in our previous faction that we love, and seeing him just basically say, everyone should be at this. And I looked at it and I was like, I'm nowhere near that, dude. And I messaged him, and a few others did too. I mean, but the majority of the chat was like, yeah, that's where we're at, or give or take. And there was a few of us going, we are nowhere near that. What the heck? And Merrick's very quickly was like, well, what's your faction? Like, boom, what's your faction? And if you're not in the, if your faction is not maxing this, you're going to blah, blah. But even that didn't explain it fully. So I think, yes, people automatically go to, if you're not in a top whatever faction, then you're not really going to be, expecting, you shouldn't expect to get things. But the reality, moving from a bubble under 100, under the top 100 faction to some of these events, we were even in the top like 27, like we broke the top 30 on some of these events recently. And we are getting every single faction milestone, and we are, blah, blah, blah. To still be talking about some of these things says, we have a good lab model, scientific process to say, here's the things that are the same, here's the things that are different. And again, I do expect that I will have an easier time hitting the solo MLC, because those three milestones that we missed, being on a 7 out of 10 sort of scale on a regular basis versus 10 out of 10, they do have a good amount of solo points in a normal world where they put them in the midweek. But that doesn't guarantee anything. I've heard people say, oh, if you're in Woken, if you're in Booty, if you're in, whatever, your eyes, top shelf Booty, not if you're in the Booty,
My
top
eye,
shelf
yes.
Booty.
We're gonna. I don't know if this one's gonna be on video, but we are experimenting with getting a video session. And I'm looking at my screen and I'm leveling up my feud perks, and I just hear, "If you're in Booty," and I was like, "Whoa!" I thought this was a.
We're in the
We're gonna have to put
Booty.
an
We're in.
NSFW disclaimer.
What in the world are these guys talking about? No,
This is a
yes, okay. So
family
top
chat, sir.
shelf Booty. If you're chasing we the ones who are rebuilding publicly on Facebook, if you're in Haven, if you're, thank you KSMA, blah blah blah. Every people are all of every of the people. English is my first language here. There's a lot of times where people say thank you KSMA as a shorthand for haha, I'm in this faction, you're not, and because I'm in this faction, I'm getting things and you're not. So there are people who believe even that the polls are weighted differently if you're in a top faction. Like maybe, just maybe, Scopely changes the algorithms that you pull better to keep you in those top factions. There's all sorts of rumors and hearsay, but the only scientific objective evidence that we have is we were in a bubble sub 100 faction. We're in a consistently top 30 faction that maxes almost, if not every single one of the faction events and milestones. And it is easier, but this month is a terrible frame of reference because they took away the carrot. The carrot moved. The finish line moved. And I think that's what El Nino's point was in the Discord is I thought I was going to get to the carrot quicker, and then the carrot moved. And sometimes Scopely does it on purpose because that's the way you keep people engaged. If they get it too early, it's like, well, what do I care? I'm just going to get that anyway. Like literally, there was another guy on Merrick's stream who is in one of those top factions, the top faction, in fact. And every time there's a new skill plate, the top faction gets that skill plate immediately. And so he was saying to Merrick's, I'm bored with this game, and I don't know why, because I have everything. And Merrick's response was, you're bored with the game because you have everything. Like, what is there left to chase? You're going to get the weekend character every time. You know that you're going to get the new skill plates every single time. There's not a struggle or strife that keeps it interesting for you.
Yeah.
So
that's good storytelling. If you learn why certain movies, why certain books are so enthralling and so much fun. It's because they use this formula called the hero's journey. And that
Yep.
journey is about overcoming conflict and obstacles. And I know you might feel like there's some obstacles in the game that you're having, that you're stuck behind. There's
Right.
no sweeter reward than getting to a place, not only in this game, but in life, in your career, in your family, in your business, where it's just like, I never thought that was possible, and yet
Right.
the runner's high, the dopamine release that comes from that, and so in some sense, it's really hard to feel bad for a person that has every chase character and every plate,
Right.
and yet I can honestly say, um, the game is not pleasurable when there is no challenge and nothing to
Right.
overcome. When there's nothing to best, when there's yeah, and that's what we're I think what we're seeing in the game is sometimes the struggle and the challenge is actually where the fun is. Sometimes
Yep.
losing to the boss is what makes beating that boss feel so good.
Right.
Instead of autoplay, beat every boss.
Right.
The last boss was the hardest boss we have faced.
Yeah.
Um,
Felt like it.
and
Yeah.
it took more coordination and more strategy and more intentionality, which equaled more fun.
Right. Well, and the
So,
reality of that is like the balance of the game is what we're talking about. There has to be whale rewards. There has to be grindable rewards. There has to be some things like you said that if you don't make it hard enough and people are like, yeah, I beat that in 2 seconds. What am I going to do with the rest of my weekend? Or whatever. But that reward, like that last boss, I did max, all of the milestones with that. I got all the solo rewards, and because it was so hard, it was like victory. Like I mentioned Final Fantasy earlier, do you ever have the Final Fantasy victory music play in your head? Do, 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 do. Like sometimes whenever I beat that boss, I'm going do 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 do, in my head, and that was like that, yay. And if it
yeah,
had been easy, I'd have been like, all right, what do you
right.
want to do now, kind of
Exactly.
thing. But it's a balance, because if the people who are kind of in that, you got your top tier, you got your mid tier, and then you got people who aren't just this, they're just not playing, they're not contributing to their faction, they're just kind of there. But if you're shooting where that middle section feels that grind, but every once in a while gets some good stuff, like I think they have the word bonus milestone in there for a reason. You
Right.
should be able to grind the quote unquote free milestone every single time. But the bonus milestones should be bonus. They should be for people who have CSS. They should be for people who spend money. That's how it keeps the game interesting for everybody. But I think the balance is a little off right now.
Well, we got a message from a fan this week.
Yeah.
We actually, and
Ooh.
it wasn't your mother or my mother that sent this message.
Hey, I just told my mom about this podcast literally yesterday. She had no idea it was happening. What's she gonna?
Well,
She's not gonna like sit there listening. Oh, my son's playing with his toys again, just like when he was a
yeah,
3-year-old. Yeah,
yep.
no, no.
Well, this fan wrote some very positive feedback, but then they suggested that we talk about. Um, he used the terms "family first factions"
Okay.
versus "rewards first factions."
Oh,
Um,
okay.
just those terms seem loaded, and I don't know
Right.
that. Are you familiar with those terms? Is that a dichotomy that you see in the game? Family first
Yeah.
faction, reward first faction.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, hearing those words, I think they speak well. Like that's a good definable term because it doesn't have to be explained too much, but to go into and explore it a little bit, yeah, because where we were with the Pearl is a family first faction, and I love that. Every single time someone says hey, I got to be out this week. Hey, my dog. Hey, unfortunately lately, hey, there's a storm coming my way. I'm not going to be on. What does Miss T, what did Captain Jack say every single time? It's, hey, family and real life comes first. Don't worry about it. We'll hold your spot. So it's not like everybody can just goof off and do nothing. But at the same time, like, you're not going to be like, yeah, hey, I'm sorry your dog died and your cat got run over by a truck and your girlfriend left you and you're behind on your mortgage. But what the heck? You better hit a 50 million war score or you're out of here. Like, that's we talked about toxic factions. That's toxic, right? But the rewards first faction, I could see being something more like, hey, we're all going to hit 50 million. If you don't, you got to have a good reason for it, but that's our goal, or whatever it is. Maybe it's 3 million. And I mean, that's a little too small, but you know what I'm saying? Whatever it is, to say, hey, this is what it takes to get us to these rewards, and that's our focus. I think what we talked about in the toxic factions episode that you mentioned, I think, is one of our most referenced, most listened to episode. Is all about, like, where do you want to be in the game? Like, if you want to be in top shelf booty, or if you want to be in,
you want to be in the booty,
1%, or they did that on purpose. You know that, right? They did that on purpose.
I don't know.
It's treasure,
it's
Rusty.
a pirate reference. I know, but in this
Bootios,
age,
Rusty, Bootios.
In this age, oh,
right?
Gosh.
Get that booty. Anyways,
I designed
treasure.
a logo for our church that I thought symbolized hospitality and goodwill towards humanity. And so I put a pineapple on the church logo. And we printed a series of shirts. We handed them out.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, the pineapple means it's the icon for swingers culture. For yeah, awesome. So I won't go into detail there, but needless to say, like, we don't have the pineapple on our stuff anymore because
you were saying something you didn't mean to say, and that's what happens every time I say booty on this podcast.
You can get in the booty faster than you ever thought you would, and then the pineapple, yeah.
So anyways, but if you are wanting that gameplay, I think it's absolutely fair for a faction to say, if you are in this faction, you will hit these minimums. I still don't like the micromanaging. On some of them, we talked about what makes a faction toxic. I think you can be a top faction and not be toxic. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. But like, for example, on Facebook, there was a character in the WWE Champions Game universe group, so to speak, that said they got kicked out of their faction because they were running too big of a feud roster. And Davey D hopped in there, and I can't do a Davey D impression worth my salt, but it was like, imagine getting kicked out of your faction for being too great a player. How great is that? That's Christopher Walken, not Davey D. Oh man, when he gets on this podcast, he's going to eat me alive. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but imagine getting kicked out of your faction because you're in too big of a feud roster, because you're too powerful for the rest of your faction. Like, you intimidate people.
That's $1 Million Man problems right there. That's what
that's is. Right. Circle it back. So tell me about this guy's response to you, though. There was more, right? And I didn't get to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, so let me give you, he wrote out a little bit, but let me give you the short version. Okay. And I'll just read their words to you.
Yeah.
And this will be your
my first time
live reaction to it.
Yeah.
Long story short, I was spending so much money on the game that I got greedy and wanted top rewards all the time. I left my family faction and even went so far as to poach many of their people to help myself. I found those top rewards in a new faction, but I sacrificed a lot of very good relationships, and I regret all of it. Have to sort out or I've had sort of made amends with a few of them, but it's very much a cautionary tale for others.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So this
Okay.
person they wrote me the extended version.
Right.
But yeah, they basically ended up in a top five faction, which
Okay.
we don't need to name the name,
No,
and
no,
I
we're
don't
not.
even know, and I don't even know
We're
if
not
they
calling it out.
are top five anymore. When
But they
this
were.
happened, at the time of this happening, so they rose to a level of prominence in the game that they shattered the faction they came from, got to a
Wow.
place in the game that they were longing for, and then would say, I regret all of it.
Everything. Wow. Wow. Okay. So let me give my first initial reaction to that. I mean, that is the way of our world, right? That's the way capitalism is set up. That's the reason why people work 90 plus hours a week and never see their family. And that also gives insight into using their language of a family first faction versus a rewards based faction. Like if you are in a toxic rewards based faction, that's saying, hey, forget your kid's birthday. It's a feud weekend. It's boss battle. You better get your butt on this game. Yeah, that's not healthy. But even internally, we talk a lot about internal motivations on this podcast. Even internally, if you are, you know, setting aside things that really have that shouldn't have as much weight in your heart as they do on here, man, yeah, that's rough. That's hard. But that balance is, and I'm trying not to talk up the toxic mafia too much here, but reality is, I was a little concerned in leaving a family first faction that I would run into a lot of that toxic behavior. Irony aside, yes, we're in toxic mafia, and it's actually not a toxic faction at all. But the
There's
reality
one guy.
of,
There's this one guy, and
oh, come
I
on, you're gonna get him riled
no,
up. Come on,
I know
come
he's
on.
listening,
You're
and you're
asking
toxic,
for it,
buddy.
Rusty. We
Okay,
kid in love, right?
all right, all right.
Kind of. No. But yeah, if you're in that and you go for this reward seeking, cutthroat behavior, etc., I could see that being a huge regret. And I was concerned that, what if I step into a faction? Am I, I max war score most of the time, but what if my war score is, not a, what if I run too small a roster or too big a roster for feud? Or what if, oh my gosh, what if I don't beat it in 12 minutes? What if it takes me 17 or even 30 minutes to finish a feud line? Oh man, because I know people who legitimately have been kicked out of their faction because it took them the allotted amount of time to finish off their feud. And sometimes that happens. Like you get a trickster dodge that screws up a whole turn, and then all of a sudden Solo Sokola and you are going back and forth for 20 minutes when you're gonna beat him, but he keeps screwing up your plans. What if I got kicked out for something like that? And thankfully that's not the experience that I've had in either faction. Both are great, phenomenal factions, but I could see that happening to someone. So you were the one chatting with them. Tell me your reactions and maybe some deeper insights, because that's just my initial gut on this.
Well, and let me just say, let me read a few more quotes. I actually have more
Yeah,
quotes, and I think their quotes in their own words are more important than my reactions to them.
right.
The first thing this person said was, "Hey, it was a poor choice on my part,
Oh wow.
but I feel like the game does that. It creates these false
Wow.
relationships that actually." And he used the word masquerade. They masquerade, or they blind you to the true and healthy relationships that you could gain.
Right.
So he used the language of, well, there's these aspirational relationships versus substantial
Right.
relationships. And
Yeah.
then and let me just tell you where it ended up, because I think the ending of this story matters and really helps us understand
Sweet.
so he said, after three or maybe four MLCs, the new faction imploded due to high levels of
Oh,
stress, high levels of stress, big egos, and not focusing on what makes the game great. Oddly
Wow.
enough, when we went to form this new faction, the top five, right? I actually started to spend more and try to continue to be the top player in my faction. And that's the kicker.
Oh,
You go to an elite faction, and yes, you'll get more rewards, but you'll also need to spend more to maintain your desired placement in that
wow.
faction. And
Yep.
anything below a top five finish in any contest had become a failure for myself.
Wow.
Anything below a top five finish, it almost reminds me of Ricky Bobby's alcoholic dad. If you ain't first, you're last. And he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that
Shake it,
doesn't
mate.
make any sense. I mean, and then later
Right.
he's like, you can finish second or third, or heck, you can finish. So
Yeah.
yeah. It was so wild to hear that, like, I
Oh,
made it to the top. No, this is somebody else. They echoed
right,
my story that I
right,
shared in the episode of Is Your Faction Toxic? But this is
right,
another player who still plays this game at an elite level, a
right,
recognizable name. When we saw who
right.
this message came in from, we were both like, "Whoa,
Oh,
this dude's legit." Um,
right. Top
and
five
and so
in a top five faction. Like, you don't miss that. You said he wants to be a
right,
top five player out of 100 in a top five faction out of literally at least that we know of 200 or 300 factions. That is someone who is trying to be in the elite of thousands,
top
if not tens of thousands of people. So,
that would mean you
wow.
rank 1 through 25 of hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
It's
Give or
it's
take.
basically
Yeah.
it's basically like finishing the New York Marathon
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
It would
And
be
then
it
being
would be
upset because somebody else was like 1 second ahead of you, right?
the Kenyan guy who had trained since childhood came in
Right,
and broke a world record to beat
right.
you. Yeah, so this is what he's saying now. Hey, currently, I jump on to play the game every now and then. I went from playing a minimum 7 to 8 hours a day to now maybe
Wow,
30 minutes. So
wow,
what's the moral of the story? I think I'm still trying to figure that out. The family faction I left is still hanging around in the top 40 or 50. Um,
right.
but I traded, but I traded a loving group of friends for 30 ranks worth of rewards. I've
Wow,
made some amends with those people, some contact from time to time, but it'll never be like it
wow,
once was. This is where it'll never be like it once was. I thought the
wow.
rewards in the game were more important and for a time, and in a certain way, I suppose it was. But I know for certain that I wish I hadn't done those things I did to the people I cared for years. The game can take over at time. Greed can cloud your judgment, but you need to identify what's important to yourself. And if rewards are more important than rewarding friendships, I challenge
Wow.
you to take a look at yourself and find what really drives you. Maybe your spending is out of line, and regardless of what people you surround yourself with, you are still your own problem.
Wow.
Let's pray.
Wow.
Every head bowed, every eyes closed. Yeah,
That's right.
that's like
That
a
was
powerful
amazing.
sermon, dude. What?
Wow. Well,
Incredible.
okay, so yes, that was. I mean, so much of that we could pick apart, and we're getting closer to the end of our time, so I got to do this quick with it, but my own personal experience going into this. So from the Pearl, the Black Pearl, I think that is if you are wanting to play this game, enjoy it. And just be around a group of people who are striving but aren't killing themselves. The Black Pearl's amazing. Having stepped out of that to go into maybe not quite like I wasn't trying to go top five like we talked about. We are in the top 30 ish, give or take. I think still a very similar vibe to what we had before. But here's the thing, like when I left the Pearl, I actually went to the leadership a week in advance. And I'm not saying I'm the model or I'm the ideal, but I went to the leadership of the faction because I was an officer. a week in advance almost and said, hey, here's what I'm working through. I want you guys in on this. I don't want you to be surprised by it. And then they use a different chat app. And so I asked, do you want me to back out of that chat? Like, I don't want people thinking that we're recruiting, because we're not. I don't want people thinking that we're in here just so we can get the top players from that faction. So if you want me out, I will be out. And they actually said, no, we want you to be in this chat. In fact, I'm still in the captain's chat for that. So I send over helpful tips and tricks every once in a while and encouragement and stuff. It is a great family. I love the people there. And while it's not, people that I'm hanging out with in person and playing board games with and striving towards my next real life goal, these are people that, I mean, legitimately, I've been playing this game for 5 years. So they may not be close personal friendships and relationships, but to say that they mean nothing would be hurtful, not just to them, but to me. And
Hmm.
so even, just a quick shout out, but like even when people from that faction, because it has happened a couple of times, when people from that faction say, hey, I'm thinking about making a move or something along those lines, the very first thing I do is go straight back to the captains and say, hey, I'm just letting you
Mm.
know, I didn't reach out to this person. They reached out to me. And every time it's been very cordial, very, it's like, hey, that sucks, but thank you for being above board with that. That was just my personal, like, I want to have, and I'm not saying this person didn't have integrity, but they did say, hey, I wish I would have done it differently. So I'm just playing off that beat a little bit. But I mean, I think you can leave a faction well. I think you can be content in the faction you're in, regardless of what level they're hitting. I mean, obviously some factions are just not doing anything, and yeah, get out of there. But even this week on the Discords conversations, it came up again. Oh, you don't have Regal because you're not, like, not to me, but to somebody else. You don't have Regal because you're not in a good enough faction. You really need to get in a faction that just does everything. And it's
Mm.
like, okay, first of all, we're not here to guilt and shame others. Second of all, really, like, you're making fun. And I mentioned this last episode, and I think it's kind of a hobby horse I got to stop beating to death here. But the average player does not have 90% of the characters that came out in the last year. Average, not exceptional, average. It is the exceptional player that has Undertaker and Farouk and Bradshaw and the New Rock. Like, if you got all of them in the last months MLC, you are literally not just in the faction name 1%. You are literally the 1% of this game. So
That's right.
if you want to be in the 1% and you want to make that sacrifice, that's great. But look at Wall Street documentaries, look at the stories of people who have made it. Like, even a cautionary tale, look at Jeff Bezos, right? Built Amazon, was at one point the richest human being in the world, and then went through a very public divorce, lost a lot. Look at Marcus Notch, Pink, who created Minecraft, very, very, very publicly posted after he sold Minecraft to Microsoft for $4 billion. Marcus, or Notch, let's just call him, yeah, he goes by Notch, and I'm being all formal here with him. Notch literally bought a house out from under Jay-Z and Beyonce that has an entire room that is literally just candy vending machines. And the next month just posted, everyone is fake. All of my friends just want money from me. I am more alone in my life than I have ever been. Go back on what used to be Twitter. You can find those
Wow.
tweets. You can find those posts, whatever X's we're calling them now. So, and look at lottery winners. There is a curse, they call it, of the lottery. People who win the lottery, and I'm getting to a really big point here, but I promise I'll go quick. People who win the lottery historically end up broke, depressed, and oftentimes commit suicide.
Mm.
So everything that people are going, oh, if I only had $100 million. So let's translate to this game. If only I had a faction that made sure I could get Undertaker and this and that and Farouk and Rock, and then my life would be complete. Here's the reality, and this is a life lesson that I didn't mean to get off on, but let's go here. You will be who you are, only louder. So if you're insecure now in the faction you're in, you get into a top faction that's pushing you, you're going to be more insecure in that faction, because who you are gets turned up. You don't change. Some things change. Don't get me wrong. Transformation is possible, but on the whole, you become who you are at a louder level. So if you're depressed by this game because you're in a, certain point and you're like, if I only had that, then I would be happy. Well, guess what? My wife and I had this exact conversation this very week. I was talking to my family about, hey, do I take this $100 away from my future to chase William Regal? And you know what my wife said? She goes, you know what? Do it or don't. But the reality is there's going to be something else tomorrow. And I went, oh my gosh, yes, that is exactly right. Do it or don't. There's going to be another thing to chase. So let's say you got William Regal and both of his incredible gears this week. I'm not saying that's not worth celebrating. That is huge. But
That's
just
awesome.
be aware you're going to be yourself, but louder, because next week they're going to come out with, Hall of Fame Vince McMahon, who instantly wins every single time you click a button or whatever. Like there's going to be something else. And now all of a sudden you're going to see your shiny Regal and go, this isn't enough. Now I need that one. So don't think winning the lottery is going to fix you. Don't think going to a top faction is going to fix you. If you are insecure, broken, and depressed in where you are, the reality is you need to find that hope and that peace in yourself, and not try to find it because you changed the faction or changed this, because all you'll end up is a louder, more version of yourself. So if you're content where you are, you'll be content where you go. If you're upset because you didn't get enough rewards in this faction, you're going to be upset because you didn't get enough rewards in that faction. It's an internal struggle that every human being wrestles with. And that's the thing. You're not uniquely broken. Every single one of us fights that battle. And we just say, hey, if we can find a level of balance between chasing those big dreams, but also being content and knowing that I am enough. Like I am created beautifully right where I am. Even if I don't get William Regal, that starts to change a lot more than just this game. It could change your whole life. And now I'm done talking, because that was a whole other thing that I meant to go into. So
Every head bowed, every eye closed. Let's
that's
pray.
right. We've done this again, haven't we?
I have this thing where I get older but never wiser, and midnights
Uh-huh.
become my afternoons. When my depression works, the graveyard shift, all the people I've ghosted stand there in the room. I should not be left to my own devices. They come with prices and vices. I end up in crisis, a tale as old as time. I wake up screaming from dreaming. One day I'll watch as you're leaving because you got tired of my scheming. Hi,
Oh,
it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
wow. Yes, there's a reason why that is the anthem of a generation.
Um, let's look at WWE TV. After that
Does that count as
Taylor
the
Swift
poem, the end of the
segue,
message?
somebody's like, dude, that was incredible spoken word. He just busted out with out of nowhere.
You
No,
should
that
write
was
that down.
that was a Taylor Swift song called Antihero. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been following NXT. Have you been following NXT?
I know exactly two things about NXT. That Dominic Mysterio is the United States champion, and
North
oh,
American
oh,
champion.
sorry. Yes, that's right. North
Yes.
American. And spoilers, maybe where you're going with this, Becky Lynch is now the NXT women. She is now officially a Grand Slam champion. I guess that's what they count for a female Grand Slam champion. I don't know, because
Okay.
the guys don't have to have the NXT belt to be a Grand Slam champion, but apparently the women do. So whatever. But yes, those are the two things. I've never in my life once. No, that's not true. I watched NXT exactly one time. I watched Keith Lee win their title,
Oh, that
where
was
he became
great.
the double champion. That was it. That's the only thing I've ever watched of NXT in my life.
Well, here's what I was thinking. Because this is an NXT takeover MLC, we could
Yeah,
talk a little bit, maybe this episode, about, and you don't have to be up to date on everything in NXT to speculate this.
right,
What the
right.
heck's going on with NXT, Lee? Why would they give main roster superstars their titles? Why would Dominic come in Now, let me give you one more update. Dominic not only holds the North American title, he will be competing next week on NXT for the NXT Championship in a belt versus
Ooh,
belt match. So arguably, one more title could be coming to the Judgment Day. Um,
yeah,
I can't see how like they're he's he's gonna win it. He's got to win it. Like, and it's gonna be incredible when he does.
right.
And another piece of Dominic information is they don't let Dominic talk in the ring on NXT because they actually want him to get his promo out. So they pre-record them like in
Oh
the
wow,
breezeway where
oh
he's
wow,
talking face to face with other superstars, so they can't boo him out of the arena. Um,
that's
so yes,
hilarious.
so Dominic's competing for like the belt on
Right,
NXT next week. Becky has the women's belt on
right,
NXT. What's going on? Are they trying to just raise the level of interest, or what is this move?
right. Well, I know. Okay, so I said I know two things. I do know from the main roster side that they've sent over Dolph Ziggler before, and he became their champion because he had it on main TV. I know Baron Corbin got sent back, or his rest. I don't know. And part of it,
He's there now. He's there
he's there
now, and
now.
he's
Okay,
started a
okay.
pretty interesting feud with Braun Breaker, who's kind of like the
Oh,
guy over there. Yeah,
Bronathan Breakason.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
channeling Davey D today. So yeah. So not knowing much about NXT, I would say, and this is pure speculation because I've stated where I am on it. I would say that they're trying to get more attention to NXT. I do know, and maybe this is breaking the walls a little bit down. Thank you, Chris Jericho. But I know that they're in a season where they're about to have to renew their cable rights licensing. That's all coming up this next year. And so they're in those things. So anything they can do right now to put themselves in a place that gets better ratings, higher view counts, more clicks, likes, and subscribes on YouTube, all of that is going to be a bargaining token for when they go in to talk to USA and Fox in particular. I think Fox is the one they're really trying to chase because that was a multi-billion-dollar deal that they had there. So my speculation, not from a wrestling standpoint, but from a company strategy standpoint, is they're trying to do anything they can to get attention on each of their shows so that it raises all the boats so that they can go in and say, hey, we have the three top rated whatever, programs on your channel. Or if they're not going to stay with Fox, I've heard Disney Plus is actually, or Disney is actually considering taking over, which would put them on ESPN, things like that. So I think I'm just guessing this is Nick Khan's strategy. That's all I got. That has nothing to do with the show, but that's my guess. That's my guess.
I mean, I have to believe that Triple H has a love and a loyalty to the black and
Oh
gold
yeah,
brand that he built from the
right,
ground up, the field that he was allowed to play in, and
right.
made it better than any
Yeah,
of the other fields. I have
yeah,
to believe that as his best friend in life, Shawn Michaels is still very much
yeah,
involved, as
yeah.
Road Dogg somehow is still very much involved on some level. Um, he during the draft,
I think
Road
so.
Dogg came out with Shawn Michaels,
Oh,
and they drafted like
oh,
the
okay. I thought he was
NXT
gone, but okay.
roster. I think and we need to look that up. That may be bad info. That
Either
may
way,
be fake news. You, my friend, are fake news. We'll look it up. But all that to say, they just puts the top baby face in the whole company
yeah,
carrying their belt. Becky Lynch
yeah,
is the top face in the
yeah.
WWE.
Right.
So face that her being heel made her more of a face. Um, so over. She's the only. I mean, that's
Right.
that's stone
Yeah,
cold
that's huge.
level
Yeah.
of over that
Right.
she can do no wrong. Every word is
Right.
gold. Every promo is an A. Every match is an
Yeah.
A. Her match with Tiffany Stratton for the belt,
Yeah.
probably the best female match I've seen this year since Becky and
Really?
Trish in the cage.
Okay, I was going to ask because Becky Trish in
So
the cage was phenomenal.
and that's you're getting that quality of work out of her
Wow.
every. That's why I called her Shawn Michaels, because
Yeah.
whoever she is in a match with becomes the most talented wrestler you've ever seen. You know,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
the rumor is Tiffany Stratton's heading up to main roster. The I
Yeah.
don't know any NXT rumors, but let's compare the two shows that I saw this week.
Okay.
Becky winning the belt in a dramatic underdog fashion versus Nia Jax's return.
Yes, let's do that.
That's that's worthy of a Raw main event where Nia Jax comes out of the
Right.
crowd in her wrestling gear to attack
Rhea.
the challenger to the title, and
Right.
then to attack the title holder. I have to believe there's some sort of triple threat build towards um Fastlane that's coming up in a
Right.
few weeks.
Oh,
This sounds like the worst women's program since before the Divas belt. I mean,
oh,
I can't
wow.
imagine a worse
Hot take.
program. Raquel versus Nia versus the fan favorite,
Right.
Mommy. You know, I mean, like
Mommy. Yeah.
this does not make any sense to me.
So add to that episode of Raw this week's with Nia being the last thing we saw on our screen was the final episode of WWE where it was owned by Vince McMahon. Now TKO, right, owns that. The Endeavor Group owns that. Vince is still, in fact, he now rumored has far more power than he did the last few years. So we'll see what happens there. But you got to think that was a Vince McMahon move. When Vince was in charge, Nia was untouchable in so many ways. I know that's Carmella's gimmick, but here's the thing. Like I once heard someone say, and I'm pretty sure it was in the Pearls chat, maybe it was Snowcat who said it, but whoever it was, they said the most prescient thing I've ever heard. They said, forgive me, Lena Fanene, or however you say your name, but Nia Jax is a dark side of the ring episode waiting to happen. And I went, oh, oh,
Wow,
ow. I felt that
that's
in my butthole. There's a Nia Jax reference for your
in the
booty.
booty. You felt that one in the
Oh,
booty.
ooh, ooh.
Uh, Let me ask you this: is there any way to redeem this? Meaning, is
Yeah.
Nia Jax headed to the Bloodline?
Oh, that might. So if they used Nia right, um, maybe like if she was the China of the group, you remember DX, like China was very capable. I would say more so than Nia Jax by a Grand Canyon of a margin, but but they use that enforcer role, and the fact that the enforcer was the female subverted tropes. It created intrigue, interest. So if they did it right, maybe. But here's the thing: they've got Solo Sokoa. So unless they're working towards Nia versus Solo, I don't know that that's interesting television. Maybe they'll get there. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. But
Yeah, well, I would say, what if they're setting up the Judgment Day versus the Bloodline? I
yeah,
know they're on opposite shows.
yeah,
There's
that doesn't stop
always a
Vince.
draft. There's always a draft. There's
Right.
always a executive order that puts this person on this show. Um,
Right.
I think Survivor Series has always really, really mattered. And they're always writing, it feels like this time of year, towards Survivor Series. Are they writing
Yeah.
an old fashioned Survivor Series 4-on-4
Oh,
match?
be still my beating heart. That's my childhood. Every Survivor Series should be 4-on-4 elimination style with an ultimate survivor,
Right?
Warrior and Hogan and Tito Santana. Oh, come
Right?
on.
The
That's my dream.
flying burrito. How did Bobby Heenan get away with calling him the flying burrito for like a
Oh, it's a
decade?
different age, but
That was a
still
different
doesn't make it
age.
right.
Oh, no, no, no. And on behalf of all
Yeah.
Latino, we apologize for the comments of Bobby
The
Heenan.
Weasel. Yeah.
Yeah, and to all women, we
But
apologize for the comments of every wrestling broadcaster of the 90s, 80s,
right.
70s. So,
So here's my only real take from this, and it's away from where you're going with it, so forgive me, but you mentioned Bloodline versus Judgment Day. The only story that I'm interested in seeing from that, Dominic Mysterio dethrones Roman Reigns. He is the man
oh
to
my gosh.
take the Universal title. They've got to do it now in this next 6 months. They've got to do it while Dominic's hot. Because here's the thing, Dominic Mysterio's heat is literally scorched earth level already. They
Oh my
take that from
gosh, dude.
Cody. They take that from every other person that deserves to dethrone Roman Reigns. And then Dominic Mysterio becomes the anti-Roman Reigns. He comes out, he does the ones thing, everything, but he's on every show. Roman was on very few. He's carrying the belt around every single time, and every time he comes to the arena, people are throwing things at him because they are so upset in their soul that Dominic Mysterio is the world heavyweight universal champion, the best that ever held that belt. And just imagine the promos. Just imagine that reaction. That happens. I am not kidding 100%. I want that in my life.
So yes, but I think it's an anarchist inside you that wants that. I think it's the CM Punk fan, the if Cena wins, we
Oh
riot.
man.
Like that's
Right.
like I would love that. I mean, like that would be great. But like Dominic would have to be Hollywood Hogan heel turn level of over to elicit fans throwing soda and beer at him
Yeah.
in the ring. Um,
Give him the
but
belt, see if it happens.
like it's kind of funny to think about, and like I that's such a gamble. I don't know if they would do, but I would say this: is it less of a gamble than bringing back Nia Jax? I mean, is it like
Right.
Nia Jax performed a top rope Samoan drop on the face and chest of Rhea Ripley this week. And
Oh,
all I could think of was like, what a
don't mess it
liability.
up.
What, like, for someone that is notoriously botch prone to
Right.
say, we're going to trust her with these big spots on
Yeah.
our champ. Um,
Yeah.
maybe that is the
Yeah.
testament to Vince's legacy to say he's maybe that's the perfect way to end
To
the
end.
McMahon chapter is to say he
Oh my
pushed
gosh.
this monster sized person with no wrestling ability like Giant
Yep.
Gonzalez is back in the ring again.
Omos.
And
Yeah.
here, yeah, I don't know.
Heidenreich. Let's keep going.
It
Yeah.
just didn't make any sense. I don't
Nathan
care. I care
Jones.
like I cared more, and that's not a lot, but I cared more about Raquel versus Rhea. And to
Right.
be fair, this week on Raw, Raquel Rhea 2 was a heck of a match. It really
Yeah.
was. It was
Yeah.
enjoyable. They were really giving Raquel some feats of strength that were impressive.
Right.
Only
Yeah.
to have
She's a
her
great
then,
wrestler.
but then to get her crushed by
By Nia.
uh,
Well,
The
credit where credit
Annihilator.
is due. Nia Jax is a phenomenon. I mean, look at what she's accomplished. And Botch included, she is one of the people responsible for the top thing that happened in the last 20 years with breaking Becky's nose. But the fact that she legitimately broke her face in order to make that happen is its own struggle. But Nia has credit where credit is due. Yes, we look at the negative sides of that. She has been able to position herself to where she is the main event of the last thing that the Vince McMahon era ever produced. And good for her.
Do you
Good
think
for her.
Hunter did Hunter book her in that slot on purpose? Was that
Oh
tongue in cheek?
gosh.
Was that like
It's
was that like a shot at the old man?
like, psh, psh, sorry, buddy. And
Oh,
maybe, I mean, honestly, I think Vince just is calling the shots now. I mean, the reality back to the corporate nonsense, the reality is Triple H is no longer an executive with the company as of this. He is the head booker, he is the creative control guy, but he's not on the board. He's not he doesn't have the influence that he had with this TKO merge. And Vince legitimately has a clause, according to Wrestle Talk. Vince legitimately has a clause in this new contract where it says that the Endeavor Group is asking Vince McMahon to stay in his spot until he dies. And we all knew Vince McMahon was going to die at his desk. But that, I mean, this legitimately solidified his power, ironically, because he was the power. And then, he started to lose it even slightly and managed to get his way back to where he is the undisputed power, even in selling his own company to somebody else. So, very possible reality coming up where Triple H is all elite. Jean Paul Levesque is all elite. We'll see. I don't
there's
think it's
no
actually
way.
going to happen, but
There's
you
no
never know.
way.
You
Ah,
never know.
we have a. I think we have a better chance of some of the other scenarios that you were musing than that one. But why don't you take us out for today? I think our time's about up.
Yep, it is. So here's the question for the community: which is more likely, CM Punk comes back to WWE, or Paul Levesque, known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley or Triple H, becomes all elite? That's the question I leave you with. I love you guys. I care about you. Be good to each other and smash gems together forever.